The station floated in the darkness between stars, a massive wheel of metal and light. Inside, Ambassador Thiranel stood before a holographic display. Her scaled fingers moved through the air, pulling up old files that few bothered to read anymore. The file was marked with red warnings. Species 347H, designation, human, status, quarantined. Thiranel had seen this file only once before during her training 800 years ago. Back then, she was a young diplomat learning about the Galactic Concordate's greatest mistakes. The humans were always taught as a lesson in what happens when first contact goes wrong. The Concordate had arrived at Earth with open arms and peaceful intentions. They offered humanity a place among the stars, access to technology beyond imagination, and membership in a civilization spanning thousands of worlds. All humanity had to do was accept Concordate law and integrate into their society. The humans refused. They didn't just refuse politely. They militarized every planet in their system within months. They built weapons, fortified their worlds, and told the Concordate that Earth would bow to no one. The Concordate, shocked by such aggression from a primitive species, made a decision. They couldn't destroy humanity. That violated every law they held sacred. But they couldn't allow such dangerous beings to spread across the galaxy either, so they built a cage. The barrier took 5 years to construct. It was a masterpiece of technology, an energy field that surrounded Earth's entire solar system and extended 50 light-years in every direction. Nothing could pass through it. No ship, no signal, no contact. The Concordate sealed humanity inside and walked away, certain that without guidance, the violent species would either destroy itself or fade into primitive darkness. That was 8 centuries ago. Thiranel stared at the file and wondered if any humans still lived. Probably not. The barrier blocked all sensors, so no one knew what happened inside. Most scholars believed humanity had wiped itself out in nuclear fire within the 1st century. Some thought they might have survived but regressed to using stone tools and living in caves. No one expected what was actually happening inside that cage. A klaxon blared through the station. Red lights flashed. Thiranel's communicator erupted with panicked voices. "They're here. The Devourers are here." She ran to the command center. The large room was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all staring at the main screen in horror. The display showed a section of space that had been home to the Kelthera civilization just yesterday. Now it showed nothing but debris and darkness. 3 billion Kelthera were gone, consumed. The Devourers had appeared at the edge of the galaxy 6 months ago. No one knew where they came from. They were machines fused with organic tissue, ships that looked like they were grown rather than built. They didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They simply moved from system to system, breaking down everything they found, ships, stations, planets, people, and absorbing it all into their fleet. The Concordate military tried to stop them. They failed. The Devourers adapted to every weapon, every tactic, every strategy. When the Concordate used energy weapons, the Devourers developed shields. When they used missiles, the Devourers learned to intercept them. When they tried biological weapons, the Devourers absorbed them and became stronger. World after world fell. The death count rose into the trillions. Thiranel watched the tactical display. The Devourers were moving in a pattern, consuming sectors systematically. She traced their projected path with one claw and felt her blood run cold. They were heading toward the human quarantine zone. "It doesn't matter," said General Vexthor, a massive insectoid warrior. "That sector is empty. Has been for centuries. The barrier will probably stop them anyway." But 3 weeks later, the sensors detected something impossible. A Concordate science vessel, fleeing from a Devourer attack, had accidentally crashed through the barrier. The ship was damaged but sent out a distress signal, a signal that was answered. The response didn't come from ancient ruins or silent planets. It came from a military vessel using technology that was both familiar and strange. The voice that spoke was calm and professional. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Coalition. We've retrieved your crew from the crash site. They're being treated at our medical facility. Please respond with your status." The command center fell silent. Every diplomat, every general, every representative stared at the screen in disbelief. Humans still existed. Not only did they exist, they had ships, medicine, military organization. The scattered reports from the rescued crew painted an impossible picture. Humanity hadn't died out or regressed. They had thrived. Behind their cage, cut off from the galaxy, they had built a civilization that spanned 47 colony worlds. Thironel immediately requested permission to make contact. The council granted it more out of curiosity than anything else. The video call connected. Captain Vasquez appeared on screen, a human woman with dark hair tied back wearing a gray uniform. Her face was weathered but strong. Her eyes were harder than any Concordat diplomat's. Ambassador Thironel, Vasquez said, "Your crew told us about the Devourers. They say these machines are destroying the galaxy." "Yes," Thironel replied carefully. "We are facing extinction. The Devourers cannot be stopped. And they're coming here. Your barrier is failing. We detected it when our ship passed through. The Devourers will reach your territory within 3 months." Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that would change everything. "Why should we care? You put us in this cage 800 years ago. You left us to die. Why should humanity help the Concordat now?" Thironel had no answer. She had expected anger, maybe hatred. But this cold calculation was more frightening than rage. "I understand your bitterness," she finally said. "What we did to your people was wrong. But if the Devourers break through, they won't stop at your borders. They'll consume you too." "Then we'll fight them," Vasquez said simply. "We've been preparing for someone to come through that barrier for 8 centuries. We always knew someone would try to finish what you started." The call ended. Thironel stood in the darkness, staring at the blank screen. Somewhere behind that failing barrier, humanity was making a choice. Would they flee into deep space and abandon the galaxy? Would they try to hide and hope the Devourers passed them by? Or would they fight? 2 weeks later, the answer came. Earth's governing council sent a single message to the Concordat. "We will fight. Not for you, for survival. Because extinction is unacceptable." The forgotten race was about to remind the galaxy what it meant to be human. The vote had been close. Nearly half of Earth's council wanted to run, to take their ships and flee into the empty spaces between galaxies. They argued that the Concordat's problems weren't humanity's responsibility. Why should humans die for the people who caged them? But Admiral Chen Wei stood before the council and spoke words that would be remembered forever. "We can run," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "We can hide in the darkness and hope the Devourers never find us. But one day they will. And when that day comes, we'll be alone with nowhere left to run. If we fight now, we fight on our terms in our territory with time to prepare. And maybe, just maybe, we prove that humans don't accept extinction quietly." The vote passed. Humanity would fight. Admiral Chen took command of all Earth's military forces. She was 70 years old. Her hair white as snow, but her mind was sharp as broken glass. She had fought in the Mars-Titan War 200 years ago when she was young. That conflict had nearly destroyed humanity from within. Millions died before Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies finally united under one banner. Chen learned something during those brutal years. War wasn't about glory or honor. War was about survival, and survival meant doing whatever it took to win. The Concordat survivors were taken to Earth to observe humanity's preparations. Ambassador Thironel walked through human military facilities with growing unease. Everything felt wrong to her trained eyes. The ships weren't elegant. They were thick with armor plating covered in redundant systems, ugly and brutal in design. Concordat ships looked like works of art, sleek and beautiful. Human ships looked like flying fortresses built to take hits and keep fighting. The weapons disturbed her even more. Concordat forces used refined energy weapons, clean, efficient, precise. Humans used kinetic weapons that hurled metal at incredible speeds, plasma weapons that burned at temperatures hot enough to melt armor, and chemical explosives that seemed primitive but devastatingly effective. "Why do you build like this?" Thironel asked a human engineer. The woman, her hands covered in grease, smiled grimly. "Because pretty ships don't come home. We learned that the hard way. Every system has 3 backups. Every weapon is designed to keep firing even if half the ship is gone. We don't build for elegance, Ambassador. We build for survival." Thironel was taken to a training facility where human soldiers prepared for combat. She watched them practice in simulated environments, learning to fight in zero gravity and toxic atmospheres, in close quarters where every corner could hide death. But what shocked her most was the augmentation program. Concordat law strictly limited biological enhancement. It was considered unethical to alter a body too much, but human soldiers volunteered for procedures that would horrify most species. Bone strengthening, muscle enhancement, neural implants that increased reaction time to inhuman levels. The soldiers called it going berserk. Isn't this dangerous? Thyronel asked Admiral Chen as they watched soldiers train. Don't these enhancements damage them? Yes, Chen said flatly. The augmentation reduces life expectancy by 20 years. The neural implants can cause psychological issues, but it also increases combat effectiveness by 300%. Every soldier who volunteers knows the cost. They choose to pay it anyway. Thyronel felt sick. This is what isolation did to you. It made you desperate enough to sacrifice your own people. Chen turned to face her, and the ambassador saw something terrible in those old eyes. Not madness, not cruelty. Just a cold understanding of reality. You think we're desperate? Chen asked quietly. Ambassador, we're practical. The Concordat had the luxury of peace because you were strong enough to enforce it. We were alone behind that barrier with no one to save us if we failed. So we learned to save ourselves, no matter the cost. Over the next weeks, Thyronel toured colony worlds and saw the same pattern everywhere. Mars was covered in military installations. The asteroid belt had been converted into weapons platforms. Every moon, every station, every rock bigger than a house had been fortified in some way. 800 years of isolation had turned humanity's prison into a fortress. But she also saw something else. Between the military bases, humans had built beautiful cities. They maintained parks and nature preserves with fierce dedication. On Earth, there were zones where no construction was allowed, where forests grew wild and oceans teemed with life. You prepare for war but never forget what you're fighting for, Thyronel said to Chen during a visit to a nature preserve. Exactly, Chen replied, watching birds fly overhead. What's the point of surviving if we lose everything that makes life worth living? 3 months passed too quickly. The barrier was failing faster than expected. Sensors showed the Devourer fleet approaching, massive beyond comprehension, thousands of ships, each one having consumed dozens of worlds. Then the first test came. A small Devourer scout force penetrated the weakening barrier. 3 ships, each the size of a city, entered human space near the outer colonies. One human frigate, the Indomitable, was patrolling nearby. Captain Rodriguez received the alert and made an immediate decision. He attacked. The Concordat watched the battle through transmitted feeds. They expected the human ship to be destroyed in seconds. Instead, the Indomitable dove into close range, firing everything it had. The ship's armor was torn away. Its engines were damaged. Half the crew died in the first exchange, but Rodriguez didn't retreat. He couldn't. The Devourers were between him and the colony world behind him. If he ran, the scouts would reach the planet and consume 5 million humans. So he fought. The Indomitable rammed the first Devourer ship at full speed, tearing through its hull with kinetic force. The impact nearly destroyed the human frigate, but it took the enemy with it. The second Devourer ship moved in to finish the kill. Rodriguez waited until it was close, then detonated the Indomitable's reactor. The explosion consumed both ships. The third Devourer fled, damaged and alone, retreating back through the barrier. The transmission from the Indomitable's bridge, sent in those final seconds, reached every ship in the fleet. Rodriguez's voice was calm despite the alarm screaming in the background. This is Captain Rodriguez to all human forces. We made them bleed. We made them run. Remember this when they come in force. We die standing. That's what we do. The transmission cut off in a flash of white light. Thyronel watched the replay in the command center. Around her, Concordat officers were silent. They had never seen anything like it. A captain who chose mutual destruction over retreat. A crew that followed him willingly into death. That's insane, General Vexthor whispered. They threw away their lives for nothing. Not for nothing, Admiral Chen said. Her voice was hard as iron. For 5 million people on that colony. For the intelligence we gained on Devourer weaknesses. For proof that they can be killed. Rodriguez gave us all of that. She turned to face the Concordat officers. You've had 800 years of peace. We've had 800 years of learning how to fight a war we always knew was coming. You're about to see if our methods work. The Concordat Senate met in emergency session. The debate lasted for hours. Finally, they voted. The alliance was approved. Humanity would fight alongside the Concordat. The forgotten race was no longer alone. The treaty was signed aboard a neutral station halfway between Earth and the nearest Concordat world. Representatives from 60 species gathered to witness humanity's integration into galactic civilization. It should have been a celebration. Instead, it felt like a funeral for the old order. Ambassador Thiranel arrived on Earth as the official Concordat liaison. Her ship descended through clouds toward the capital city, and she pressed her face against the window, trying to understand what she was seeing. Earth was covered in military installations. Railguns pointed toward the sky from every continent. Missile silos dotted the landscape like metal flowers. The orbital space was crowded with defense platforms, mines, and automated weapons systems. But between the fortifications, she saw gleaming cities full of life. Parks where human children played, museums and theaters and universities. It was a world preparing for war while refusing to stop living. Her guide was a human named Lieutenant Marcus Cole, a young Marine with sharp eyes and an easy smile. He showed her around the capital, pointing out landmarks and explaining human culture. That building there, he said, gesturing to a massive monument, was built to honor the people who died during the isolation. Every name is carved in the stone. 14 billion people lost to diseases we couldn't cure, disasters we couldn't prevent because we were cut off from the galaxy's knowledge. Thiranel felt shame burn through her. I'm sorry. I didn't know the cost was so high. Marcus shrugged. It's history now. But we remember. We always remember. The integration of human and Concordat forces proved difficult. The two groups trained together, but friction was constant. Concordat soldiers followed strict honor codes. They fought in formations, followed prescribed tactics, and believed in clean, honorable warfare. Human soldiers fought to win. During a joint training exercise, a Concordat unit refused to use a tactical advantage because it would violate their honor code. The human unit exploited the weakness immediately and won the simulation. General Vexthor was furious. That was dishonorable. You attacked us from behind. The human commander, Colonel Sarah James, looked at him with confusion. It's called tactics, General. The enemy won't care about your honor code. They'll just kill you. We have rules of engagement. Vexthor's mandibles clicked in anger. War must be fought with honor. Admiral Chen intervened before the argument could escalate. She stood between the two forces and spoke clearly. General Vexthor, I respect your traditions. But you've had 800 years of peace because no one was strong enough to challenge you. We've had 800 years of preparing for someone to try to wipe us out. Your honor code is beautiful. Our survival instinct is practical. We'll see whose methods work when the devourers arrive. The tension didn't disappear, but the training continued. Slowly, grudgingly, the two forces began to learn from each other. Concordat soldiers taught humans about energy shield coordination and sensor technology. Human soldiers taught the Concordat about improvised weapons, psychological warfare, and how to keep fighting when everything seemed lost. Meanwhile, strategists from both sides met to plan the defense. The main conference room was tense. Holographic displays showed the approaching Devourer fleet in the Concordat's territory. Admiral Chen presented humanity's proposal. The room went silent as species after species realized what she was suggesting. You want us to abandon our outer colonies? A Concordat senator stood up, trembling with rage. To let billions die? That's your strategy? Those colonies are already dead, Chen said bluntly. The Devourers will reach them in 3 weeks. You don't have the force to defend them. Every ship you send to protect the outer worlds is a ship that won't be here to defend the core. So we just give up? Another senator demanded. We let our people die? No, Chen said. You evacuate everyone you can. You turn the outer worlds into bait. You lure the Devourers into human territory, where we've been preparing for exactly this kind of fight for 8 centuries. You use the quarantine zone as a trap. Thiranel spoke up. She's right. I've seen what humans have built. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid in their territory is weaponized. If we fight there, we have a chance. The debate lasted 3 days. Concordat politicians argued about ethics, about responsibility, about whether such a sacrifice could be justified. Human representatives listened in growing frustration. Finally, Chen stood and silenced the room with a single statement. We're offering you survival, not salvation. Your outer worlds are already lost. The only question is whether their deaths will mean something or not. Make them count. The vote was close, but it passed. The Concordat would evacuate what they could and retreat to human territory. The trap was set. The evacuation was chaos. Millions of refugees flooded into human space, bringing everything they could carry. Human colonies opened their doors. cramming refugees into every available space. Food, water, medical supplies. Humanity shared what they had, even though they knew war was coming. Lieutenant Marcus Cole was assigned to help refugees settle on Mars. He met a young Concordate soldier named Zix, barely more than a child by his species standards. Zix's homeworld had been consumed by the Devourers. His entire family was gone. "I heard stories about humans," Zix said one night as they looked at the stars. "They called you the monsters in the cage. They said you were too dangerous to be allowed in the galaxy." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Maybe we are. But we're your monsters now." Zix looked at him with large, dark eyes. "Why are you helping us?" "After what we did to you?" "Because extinction is unacceptable," Marcus said simply. "Doesn't matter who you are. Everyone deserves a chance to survive." The weeks passed. The evacuation continued, but not everyone could be saved. Entire worlds were left behind, knowing the Devourers would consume them. Humanity watched the death count rise and remembered every world lost. They carved the names into memorial stones, promising that none would be forgotten. Finally, the barrier failed completely. The energy field that had caged humanity for 800 years collapsed like a broken window. Sensors immediately picked up the Devourer fleet. It was larger than anyone feared. Thousands of ships, each one massive and terrible. They moved through space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, the Endurance. Around her, every screen showed Devourer ships approaching. The count kept rising. 5,000, 7,000, 10,000, all ships, she said calmly. "This is Admiral Chen, the enemy is here. Remember your training. Remember who you're fighting for. Remember that we are humanity and we do not accept extinction." She paused, then gave the order that would begin the battle for survival. "Spring the trap. Show them why you don't cage predators." Across human space, weapon systems came online. Platforms that had been waiting in darkness for centuries powered up. Mines that had floated dormant in asteroid fields armed themselves. Every human ship, station, and colony prepared for war. The Devourers entered the trap expecting easy prey. They were about to learn what 800 years of isolation had created. The first Devourer ships crossed into human territory at full speed, confident in their power. They had consumed 1,000 worlds. What could these isolated primitives do to stop them? They found out immediately. The asteroid field at the edge of human space erupted. Rocks that had floated peacefully for centuries suddenly revealed themselves as weapons platforms. Railguns fired, launching metal slugs at relativistic speeds. Missiles streaked through space. Laser batteries burned through the darkness. The first wave of Devourer ships, 300 strong, hit the automated defenses and lost 45 vessels before they even saw an enemy. The machines tried to adapt, redirecting shields and adjusting their approach. That's when the second line of defense activated. Human ships had been waiting in the asteroid field. Engines cold, energy signatures hidden. They looked like debris, forgotten relics floating in the void. But when the Devourers pushed forward, the debris came to life. 50 human destroyers activated simultaneously, emerging from hiding at point-blank range. They fired everything they had: kinetic weapons, plasma cannons, nuclear missiles. The Devourers couldn't adapt fast enough. Another 100 ships were destroyed in the first 30 seconds. On the bridge of the Endurance, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Phase 1. Successful. All ships fall back to Phase 2 positions. Make them chase you. The human ships retreated, drawing the Devourer fleet deeper into the trap. The machines followed, analyzing and adapting with every kilometer. They adjusted their shields to counter kinetic weapons. They deployed point defense systems to intercept missiles. They learned. But humans had been preparing for an enemy that could learn. The Devourer fleet reached Mars. The red planet hung in space, seemingly defenseless. Scans showed minimal military presence, just a few orbital platforms and some ground installations. The Devourers moved in to consume it. Mars opened fire. The entire planet was a weapon. Atmosphere processors that normally created breathable air were modified to generate superheated plasma. Electromagnetic accelerators built into the planet's crust launched tungsten rods into space at incredible velocities. Orbital mirrors focused sunlight into beams hot enough to melt armor. The Devourer formation broke apart under the assault. Ships scattered, trying to escape the killing field. Human vessels waiting in ambush positions attacked from all sides, catching the enemy in a crossfire. 3,000 Devourer ships had entered the Mars engagement zone. Only 2,000 left, but the cost to humanity was terrible. Mars's surface was burned by the weapons fire. 2 cities were destroyed when Devourer ships crashed into them. 500,000 humans died in minutes. Lieutenant Marcus Cole was on Mars when the attack hit. His unit was defending a refugee center when a Devourer ship, damaged and falling, crashed 3 kilometers away. The impact sent a shockwave that leveled buildings for miles. Marcus crawled out of the rubble, his armor cracked, his body broken. Around him, other Marines pulled themselves from the wreckage. They had minutes before Devourer ground forces arrived. "On your feet," he shouted. "We've got civilians to protect." They fought for 3 hours. Human Marines against Devourer machines in close quarters combat through ruined streets. Marcus killed 5 of the mechanical horrors before a lucky strike shattered his leg. He kept fighting on the ground until reinforcements arrived. Zix, the young Concordat soldier, found him in a field hospital hours later. "You're insane," Zix said, looking at Marcus's wounds. "You should have retreated." "Couldn't," Marcus replied through pain medication. "Refugees were behind us. We had to hold." Zix stared at him in wonder. "This is how you fight." "Every battle. Every time. This is how we survive." The battle continued across human space. The Devourers pushed toward Earth, and humanity made them bleed for every kilometer. Entire fleets sacrificed themselves to delay the enemy advance by hours. Colonies were evacuated, then turned into bombs that detonated when the Devourers arrived. The human carrier Last Dawn was surrounded by 20 Devourer capital ships. The carrier was doomed, everyone knew it. But between the Last Dawn and Earth were 30 refugee transports carrying 2 million civilians. Captain Thompson gave her final order. "All hands, abandon ship. Except bridge crew. We're buying the refugees time." The crew evacuated. The captain and her bridge officers stayed. They accelerated the carrier to maximum speed and aimed it at the largest Devourer ship. "For everyone we've lost," Captain Thompson said into the transmission, "for everyone we'll never lose again." The Last Dawn struck at 90% light speed. The impact released energy equivalent to a small star dying. The Devourer capital ship was vaporized instantly. The shockwave destroyed 6 more enemy vessels. The refugee transports escaped. Admiral Chen watched the sacrifice from her command center. She added Captain Thompson's name to the memorial list. The list was getting very long. The Concordat forces fighting alongside humans were shocked by the human willingness to sacrifice. They couldn't understand it. In Concordat culture, retreat was acceptable. Surrender was honorable. Survival was the ultimate goal. But humans treated death as a weapon. General Vexthor confronted Chen during a brief pause in the fighting. "Your people throw themselves away," he said. "This isn't tactics. It's suicide." "It's buying time," Chen replied. "Every ship that sacrifices itself saves 100 others. Every hour we delay the Devourers is another hour to evacuate civilians to prepare defenses to find a weakness. This is madness. This is survival." Chen's voice was ice cold. "You've never had to fight a war where losing means extinction. We have. And we learned that sometimes the only way to save many is to sacrifice few. It's not madness, General. It's math." The Devourers adapted to human tactics as expected. They learned to scan for hidden ships. They developed countermeasures for human weapons. They adjusted their formations to minimize casualties, but they were adapting to conventional tactics. They didn't understand desperation. The Devourer fleet reached Earth's moon. They expected another fortified position, more weapons platforms, more conventional defenses. Instead, they found something that made no tactical sense. The moon was hollow. Humanity had spent centuries excavating the lunar interior and filling it with the largest mass driver ever constructed. A weapon so massive it could only be used once because firing it would tear the moon apart. Admiral Chen gave the order. "Fire the Luna cannon." The moon shuddered. Its surface cracked. And from the massive hole in its center, a projectile the size of a mountain launched at near light speed. The projectile hit the center of the Devourer formation and kept going. Tearing through ship after ship like paper, 50 Devourer vessels were destroyed instantly. 100 more were damaged beyond repair. The moon shattered from the recoil. breaking into pieces that spread across Earth's orbit. Ambassador Thiranel watched from the Endurance in horror and awe. Humans had destroyed their own moon to kill the enemy. You sacrificed your moon, she whispered. We'll build another, Chen replied. After we survive. The Devourers regrouped. They analyzed the attack, calculated the cost, and determined their optimal strategy. Push to Earth, end this resistance. Consume the human homeworld and break their will to fight. They committed their reserve fleet, another 2,000 ships. The largest force they had deployed in the entire invasion. Earth waited. The planet bristled with weapons. Every city was a fortress. Every street had firing positions. Every civilian had been evacuated to underground bunkers or off-world transports. The final battle was about to begin. The Devourer fleet surrounded Earth like a mechanical plague. 5,000 ships blocked out the stars. Every sensor showed the same thing. Overwhelming force, inevitable defeat, certain extinction. Inside the underground command center, Admiral Chen stood before the tactical display. Her staff waited for orders. Ambassador Thiranel stood beside her, along with representatives from a dozen concordate species. They had all chosen to stay, to witness humanity's final stand. Admiral, said Colonel James quietly, they're demanding our surrender. They've never done that before. Chen studied the message on her screen. The Devourers had sent a simple communication: surrender and be absorbed into the collective. Resist and be destroyed, they're learning, Chen said. They think we're like the Concordate, that we'll choose survival over defiance. And what's your answer? Thiranel asked. Chen smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Colonel, send a message to the Devourer fleet. Tell them we decline, and activate Project Samson. The command center went silent. Every human officer knew what Project Samson was. It was humanity's final contingency plan, the ultimate weapon built during centuries of isolation. They had turned the sun into a bomb. Deep inside the star, exotic matter had been seeded over decades. Matter that was held stable by a network of satellites and constant energy input. If that network was disrupted, the exotic matter would react with the sun's core. The reaction would trigger a supernova. It would destroy the Devourer fleet. It would also destroy every planet in the solar system. Earth, Mars, Venus, all the colonies that humans had built over centuries, would be vaporized. Total extinction in exchange for taking the enemy with them. Thiranel grabbed Chen's arm. You can't. You're bluffing. Watch me, Chen said coldly. She input the authorization codes. Across Earth's solar system, satellites began powering down. The exotic matter started to destabilize. The sun flickered. Energy readings spiked. The star's surface began to ripple with unusual activity. On their ships, the Devourers analyzed the data. Their calculations showed the same result every time. If they didn't retreat immediately, the star would explode. They would be destroyed. For the first time in their campaign across the galaxy, the Devourers encountered something they couldn't adapt to. An enemy that preferred mutual destruction over defeat. The machines hesitated. Their entire existence was built on consumption, on adding to their collective. Extinction achieved nothing, but neither did retreat. The sun grew brighter. The exotic matter was minutes from reaching critical mass. All ships, Chen broadcast. This is not a bluff. We are humanity. We have been isolated for 800 years. We have been written off as extinct. We have been caged, forgotten, and dismissed. But we have never accepted defeat. If we cannot have survival, we will take vengeance. Leave our system or die with us. The Devourer fleet remained motionless. Their calculations ran again and again. Probability of human bluff, 0. The star was genuinely destabilizing. Probability of fleet survival if they stayed, 0. For 30 seconds that felt like hours. Nothing happened. Then the Devourer fleet turned. They withdrew from Earth orbit. They retreated from human space. For the first time in their conquest, they fled. Chen waited until they crossed beyond the system's edge. Then she input the shutdown codes for Project Samson. The satellites reactivated. The exotic matter stabilized. The sun slowly returned to normal, but the cost was already paid. The battle for Earth was won, but the war had consumed humanity. 23 of 47 colony worlds were gone. 60% of the fleet was destroyed. 14 billion humans had died, matching the death toll from 8 centuries of isolation. The moon was shattered. Mars was burned. The asteroid belt was a graveyard of broken ships and bodies. Earth itself was scarred, cities in ruins, continents marked by weapons fire and crashed vessels. But humanity survived. The Concordate Senate convened an emergency session. For hours, representatives debated how to respond to humanity's sacrifice. They had saved the galaxy, but at terrible cost. Ambassador Thyronel stood before the Senate and spoke words that changed the course of galactic civilization. For 800 years, we quarantined humanity. We told ourselves it was for the safety of the galaxy. We said they were too dangerous, too violent, too primitive to join us. But we were wrong. We weren't afraid they would hurt us. We were afraid they would show us what we'd become, soft, comfortable, unprepared for real danger. She gestured to the displays showing the devastation in human space. Humanity didn't save us with superior technology or ancient knowledge. They saved us with something we'd forgotten, the will to survive no matter the cost. They faced extinction and chose to fight instead of surrender. They turned their prison into a fortress and made the devourers fear them. "What are you proposing?" asked the Senate leader. "Full integration, not as members seeking approval but as equal partners who earned their place through blood and sacrifice. Open all territories to human settlement, share all technology, and learn from them before we face the next threat." The vote was unanimous. 3 months later, Admiral Chen addressed the Concordate Senate. The chamber was packed with representatives from every species. Behind Chen stood a delegation of human survivors, soldiers, scientists, civilians who had endured the war. "For 800 years you locked us away," Chen said. Her voice was quiet but carried across the chamber. "You called us monsters, savages, too dangerous to exist alongside you. And maybe you were right. Maybe we are monsters." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But we're the monsters that saved you. We're the ones who stood between the devourers and extinction. We're the ones who paid the price you couldn't. We'll join your concordate. We'll work with you to rebuild. But we join as partners, not supplicants. And if you ever forget what we sacrificed, if you ever again decide another species is too dangerous for your perfect civilization, we'll be there to remind you." She gestured to the other. "Humans. We are the forgotten race. The isolated. The caged. The extinct. Except we refused to die. We faced the end of everything and fought anyway. Remember that the rebuilding took years. Human and concordate engineers worked together to repair damaged worlds. New colonies were founded. Technology was shared freely. The barrier that had caged humanity was dismantled completely. Its satellites melted down and turned into memorials. Lieutenant Marcus Cole, now promoted to captain, returned to Mars. The planet was being terraformed again, scars from the battle slowly healing. He visited a memorial where names of the fallen were carved in stone. 14 billion names from the isolation, 14 billion more from the war. Zix joined him at the memorial. The young concordate soldier had stayed with human forces, learning their ways. "My people are teaching human history in schools now," Zix said. "They call you the species that survived isolation, faced extinction, and won anyway." "We didn't win," Marcus said quietly. "We just refused to lose. There's a difference, but what will you do now? The war is over." Marcus looked at the stars, visible now that the barrier was gone. After 8 centuries, humans could finally see the galaxy they'd been denied. "We'll explore. We'll build. We'll learn from the Concordate and teach them what we know. But we'll never forget the cost of survival." He turned to Zix. "And we'll make sure no other species is ever isolated like we were, because everyone deserves a chance to survive." On Earth, Admiral Chen stood in her office reviewing reports of the reconstruction. Her hair was whiter now, her face marked by exhaustion, but her eyes were still sharp. Ambassador Thyronel entered without knocking. She had become Chen's closest friend during the war. "The Senate wants to give you a medal," Thyronel said. "Hero of the Concordate. Savior of civilization." "I don't want their medal." "I told them you'd say that." Thyronel sat down. "What do you want?" Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want people to remember, not just the victory, but the cost. I want them to understand that survival isn't glorious. It's ugly and brutal and filled with sacrifice. I want them to know what we paid so they never have to pay it again. They will. Your people made sure of that." Chen looked out the window at Earth. The planet was healing, but the scars would remain for generations. Cities were being rebuilt. Forests were growing back. Life continued. The Concordat called us the Forgotten Race, Chen said softly. They thought isolation would make us disappear. Instead, it made us remember. Remember what it means to fight. Remember what survival costs. Remember that extinction is unacceptable. Thironel joined her at the window. Your people terrify us, you know. That hasn't changed, Chen smiled. Good, fear keeps you cautious. Respect keeps you honest. We'll teach you both. Years passed. The scars faded. New generations grew up in a galaxy where humans and Concordat species lived side by side. But in every human school, every human home, the lesson was taught. Survival comes at a cost. Never forget those who paid it. The galaxy had tried to forget humanity, to cage them and hope they disappeared. Instead, they created something they never expected. A species that turned isolation into strength, that faced extinction with defiance, that refused to accept defeat. Humanity was no longer forgotten. They were remembered, respected, and feared in equal measure. The monsters in the cage had broken free and saved the galaxy, and they would never let anyone forget it.